Good morning.
My name is John Unfred. I'm the Assistant Chief in Lakewood, southern neighbor of Tacoma. I've got a series of 11 questions for you, but before we start, we'll do introductions from the interview panel.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning, Avery. I'm Joe Duenas. I am the police chief for the Puyallup Tribal Police Department, a jurisdiction within the city boundaries of Tacoma.
Nice to meet you, sir.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning. My name is Catherine Olson. I am the former director of what's internal affairs for the Seattle Police Department. As a civilian, was appointed as the director and currently doing consulting.
Nice to meet you.
Good morning, Avery. I'm Johnny Alexander, retired Assistant Chief of the Washington State Patrol, and now currently at the Criminal Justice Training Center.
Nice to meet you.
Commission, that is.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good morning, Avery. I'm Tori Green. I'm the fire chief here at Tacoma.
Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Carla Santorno, Superintendent, Tacoma Public Schools.
Nice to meet you.
All right. Any questions before we begin?
No, just appreciate your time. So thank you very much for this awesome opportunity. I'm humbled just to be here, and I don't take it for granted how valuable your time is. So again, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for coming. Question number one. We've all had an opportunity to review your resume. From your perspective, how does your background and experience prepare you to be the chief of police of the city of Tacoma?
So thank you for that question. It's a really good question because I know that right now there's a market for people applying chief jobs all over the nation. And I can assure you I'm not that guy. Where I decide to apply is very important to me. And when I thought about Tacoma, I actually received an email from the recruiter asking me would I consider applying here. And I promised him that I would do some due diligence just to make sure, number one, that I was the right fit for the city of Tacoma. So I did my due diligence, really was excited about what I learned about the city of Tacoma, called him back and said, absolutely, I'd be interested in applying. The things that the brochure said that the city was looking for in a chief, I have a proven track record in those areas. As it relates to helping to reduce crime, I understand how to do that. I will be candid with you. It's going to take everybody, community, local government, and police to reduce crime. I do have experience in a crime plan. We just actually started implementation of our crime plan in the city of Dallas in May, and I'm excited to announce the results are just outstanding. We're one of the few, if not the only, major city in the country that's been successful at reducing crime. So I know that plan, it won't be exact here because it was tailor-made for Dallas. I believe a tailor-made plan here would be successful, and I know how to go about facilitating that effort. Secondly, community relations. The word I would use is strained in Tacoma. I have a proven background in that as well. In Dallas, extremely diversified. So I've had the opportunity to be really engaged in the community and build trust. I know how to do it. It begins with communication. It begins with availability and visibility, and really the want to, as I involve myself in the community. And thirdly, I've also had the opportunity to build morale. Morale is so important in a police department as it relates to public safety, in that you can't have a successful crime plan. You can't have successful community relationships if you have a demoralized police department. You have to build your officers up. The strategy that I introduced yesterday, I call it weed, seed, and feed. We're definitely going to weed out the criminal element of our city. We're going to sow into our communities, and we're going to feed our officers with positivity. They need to know that they're appreciated. They need to know that the work they do is so respected and honorable. And I have a background that's successful in that. So that's why I decided to apply here. And I'm excited just about the opportunity to meet those challenges.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Given your knowledge of Tacoma, what would you anticipate being some of the significant challenges you would face as the new police chief?
So besides the three that I just named, so I won't just repeat those. Recruitment, I know there's an issue with staffing. And along with that, retention. So I believe that you have to go back to the very beginning and make sure that your core values align with the people you're hiring. In my 31 years of experience, studying agencies, even we were guilty of this, we've gotten away from our core values. We went back to our core values and we've been successful in hiring new recruits to be officers. So right now in Dallas, we don't have a lack of hiring. The only thing that really slowed us down is COVID. So how we actually get the candidates in the seats. We can't use the numbers that we had planned to, but we're doing very well as it relates to recruiting and retention right now. So the point I'm making is if your goals are aligned with your hiring, then you're going to hire the right people. And when you hire the right people, that actually takes care of retention, because the reality is your core values are really 2 to 3. And to me, in policing, it's a commitment to protect and serve. So you hire people that have the same passion for people, that have the same passion to protect and serve. And you just make sure they align with those values. You make your decisions on who you hire based off those values. And again, I believe that takes care of the latter part, retention. You have to kind of be smart or unique, I guess, in how you go about doing it. One of the things that we did that I thought was just an awesome decision was we hired a marketing firm and we took their recommendations and we implemented them. And because of that, we've had, again, great success when it comes to hiring and retention. And I would love the opportunity to bring that here. Something I'm really proud of is I wasn't over that, but I volunteered to be a significant part of that. So we have billboards throughout the nation. And if you ever see one and you look up, I'm the guy in the middle, and what we did is we knew that we needed to hire more people of color, more women, and that's what we went after. We partnershiped with high schools, and we created a pathway to law enforcement, and it's been very successful. Right now, we're in partnership with 3 high schools. We plan to expand that throughout the city, and it's just been great. I believe you need to be out in the communities and actually get the people that live in the communities to want to be a police officer. So the pride that you have being a police officer, you need to manifest that. The passion you have, the love that you have for the people you work with and the communities that you serve is significant. So that's how we can go about the staffing issue.
Thank you, Avery.
Thank you.
Avery, I'm going to build on that same question.
Yes,
One
ma'am.
of the challenges we've had in Tacoma is the division in our community around school resource officers, and just wondered if you've had, any experience in.
That's a
that issue.
good question. And so I'm gonna answer it 2 ways.
Okay.
Years ago, don't want to tell my age, but I was actually a school resource officer for Liberty Junior High. Fascinating, awesome opportunity for me. And I didn't realize how significant that role was until earlier this year. And what happened is I received a picture on my phone, and it was me sitting on a bench talking to a student. Had no idea who the student was. I was so much younger, I almost didn't identify myself. But underneath it said, "Sarge, you didn't know this, but you were my DT sergeant, and you were also my SRO officer, and I became a police officer because of you." And that just hit me right in my heart. So that's one aspect. The second aspect, about 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to create an SRO program at Lake Highlands High School, partnershiped with Councilman Magoo and Lake Highlands High School staff, and we created an SRO program. And today that program is still alive, doing very well, and I'm really proud of that. So I believe in SROs because, again, you can't measure the impact because I had no idea the impact I had. I was just doing the job the best of my ability, but it turned out to be fruitful because in essence, I was recruiting officers and didn't even know it. So thank you for that.
So research has indicated that implicit racial bias and cynicism often impact human behavior. What can law enforcement do to combat the effects of implicit racial bias and cynicism so that they do not negatively affect how police enforce the law?
So it starts with education. One of the things that I helped facilitate in Dallas is we offered and made mandatory implicit bias training. In that training, it's very passionate, if you will. People are able to express their understanding, things that they feel, biases that they weren't even aware that they had. And I think that's where you begin. As you grow that program, I think it's important that you invite the community in. That's something that I would do here. I think that education is key because you get understanding, which is ultimately what you want. If you can understand why people think the way they think, why they feel the way they feel, it just makes it better all around as it relates to being able to cooperate and collaborate on efforts to make the city safe and support of public safety, not just the police department, but the whole city in particular. So that's what I think about implicit bias. I think it's a very important topic that unfortunately has been ignored for a long time. But I think the fruits of that are just so beneficial that you can't ignore it. Again, we made it mandatory. If it's not mandatory here, it will be if I'm the chief. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that. Question number 4. Tell us about your background and experience with community policing and how that experience transfers to the city of Tacoma.
So, 31 years I've had the opportunity to do a lot. But when I became a major, I was the only major that was made a division commander. So I had the opportunity to actually lead Northeast Patrol as if it was his own city. Part of my directive from Chief Brown at the time was to make Northeast better. So what I realized is that we had some support from the community, but we could get better. Morale was really low, so definitely had to address that because I think it's all intertwined. So first thing I did is met with the public. I called it a night with the chief. We met at a local church and we just had a night of engagement and talking. It was more question and answer. They asked me questions, I answered, and we had a really good time. That was the beginning of our relationships. I went to events pretty much every night, community watch events, so they could know me as their chief and just not know there's a chief in the building. So very hands-on, very out in the community. And I think that's how you, I actually know that's how you build community trust and community support, which I think are just so valuable as it relates to violent crime. So as I said, violent crime, when I actually went back to Northeast, we led the city in violent crime. And Chief Brown actually referred to it as the Mecca of all crime. So one of my tasks, again, was to lower the crime, build the trust and morale. Well, as we actually came together and collaborated and cooperated and had one common goal, which was to make Northeast the safest we could make it, we were able to do that. So just bragging a little bit, we had 12 consecutive months of reduced violent crime. I take none of the credit. It was the hard work of the men and women of the police department and the hard work of the community. One of the things that I believe in is VIPs, which is volunteers in patrol. When I got there, we had about 100. We were able to get that up to over 1,000 active members of that community that volunteered to be volunteers in patrol. They would actually go out and help us patrol. We trained them on Saturdays. I attended some of the training. And more importantly, man, we created such a good partnership and relationship. So I'm still proud to say, even though I'm not over Northeast anymore, you won't find any better community support in the entire city than in Northeast Dallas, in my opinion. Not that the other areas aren't supportive, but they are unbelievable with their support. And I just believe I had a big hand in that. Engagement-wise, we engaged them right where they were. We discovered that kids didn't have coats for the winter. So in our health and safety fair, we were able to give away 1,000 coats. Each year, I would challenge my team to give away more. We would do that. We gave away free immunization. David Brown called me just out of the blue and said, hey, this dentist, married couple want to meet you. So I met with them and they had a mobile dentist truck. They would come out and they service the kids free, with cavities and so forth. So what I've learned is if you give communities what they want, listen to them, give them a voice, show them the respect and dignity that they deserve, you can build relationships and trust. And when you need it, they're there for you.
Thank you very much.
Avery, just as a follow-up to that question, was that community predominantly people of color?
Yes, in that, in North, it's called 5 Points. In that area alone, there's 23 different dialects. So yes, people of color, but the great thing about it is it wasn't limited to that. When I say the community came out in support, it was really the community. The great thing about Northeast Dallas is it's affluent. It has some impoverished areas, but when the call of action came out and basically made everyone feel welcome, everyone came out to support. And it's just an awesome thing. In fact, this Saturday, I attended again. We're doing it a little different because of COVID. So it's more of a drive-through, but the cars were wrapped around the block. And it's not as personal as when I was there because of COVID, but the support and the need that the people need that we give, man, it's just unbelievable. And it's a feeling that you'll never, ever forget, to see kids' faces light up when they get a coat. And what we do in these events is we kind of specialize a group. So kids that are of special need, we focused on them and we gave them extra stuff, bikes and toys, and to see their faces light up is just unbelievable and something that you'll never forget. So it's those type of things that I think are transferable. I recognize everything is not, but I think if you tell the community, we're here to service you and to give you what we can give you, and you get the right partnership, you can actually do that.
Thank you. I have your next question, and it's the new police chief will need to work with the communities that are disproportionately impacted by police activity and focus on building trust with their stakeholder groups. If selected for the position, how would you go about making connections with communities disproportionately impacted by police activity and build trust among community stakeholder groups?
So besides the things I've already mentioned, I'm just going to emphasize communication. I believe in listening sessions. So you go directly to those communities and you sit down with them and you have open conversation that's honest, robust. The key is you don't leave the table until you compromise on what you're going to do, i.e. results. Because it makes no sense to just communicate, but you leave the table and there's nothing that you agreed on. So that's what I'm big on. I will give everybody a voice. I think it's important. Me being a man of color, that's extremely important to me. I've lived in neighborhoods that were disproportionate. I've lived in neighborhoods where I was racially profiled, even as an officer. So I know what that's like. It's very real to me. And I'm sensitive to it. And I recognize that the only way that you're going to get through it is to be honest that it happens, and then be honest in how you strategize to fix the issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Avery, tell us about a time when you led a major transformation for an organization. What were some of the challenges you faced in doing so, and what were the successes?
So by major organization, what do you mean exactly?
Transformation for any organization.
Okay. So we'll go back to Northeast and then I'll kind of come up to where I am now. Northeast, I mentioned earlier, morale was extremely low. It was so bad to where the bathrooms looked like they hadn't been cleaned, toilets hadn't been flushed. That's how bad it was. So what I did is I sat down with the officers almost on a one-on-one basis and got their issues. And I promised them if I couldn't resolve it right now, that I would have an answer response to them within a week. I kept my word to that. And the main issues were just the building itself. It was old, looked like it hadn't really been maintained. So in partnership with various organizations, one, the Boy Scouts, part of their duties is they have to take on an event where they go out and do some free work. So they decided to come and they redid our flower bed for us, and they made the outside look good. They sand all our cabinets and refinished them. Home Depot came in and said, Chief, we'll redo your details and the office area. So they redid the floors. So as all this is going on, we have a community meeting at night. And a lady comes up to me and she says, Chief Moore, where's the women's bathroom? So I said, oh, it's just down the hall to the right. So she comes back and she says, oh my God, I've never seen a weight room as horrible as that. That's embarrassing. I want to fix it. And I said, yes, ma'am. So she said, I have my guy coming out. He's going to give me an estimate. So he comes out. He gives an estimate of $25,000. She writes a check. But because of the amount, I have to send it downtown and get approval. When in that process, EBS has to do the work because it's a City of Dallas facility. So they come out and they give an estimate and it grows to $50,000. So I call the lady back and I say, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to return your check to you. The work is gonna cost $50,000. She says, no, you're not. You'll have $25,000 more in the morning. And she sent it. She, to this day, is anonymous. I know who she is, but it was all because we reached out in a way that we asked for help and the public responded. So doing those little things, cosmetic wise to the building, allowing officers to do their jobs, because I created some tasks on my resume. You'll see the GOLD team. That was all to build morale. The argument with the officers were all we get to do is go from call to call. So I devised a way that they could actually do thorough follow-up investigations. It was a force multiplier for the investigative unit, which at the time I was not over. And we just built morale through engagement. We would go out together. We'd have social events. We'd go play pool. We had Monday night football. We had a family banquet, and we did family picnics. And all this was what we decided to do, just to come together as a family, and morale skyrocketed. It's kind of the same approach I have now. I believe in family. I believe it's acceptable that leadership tell their team that they love them and that they appreciate them. And I do that. I get updates through email all the time, and I respond to them. When they say, hey, Chief, this is what we've done, I send back, great job, good work, something just to acknowledge my officers, and that's built morale. So from that perspective, that's how I transform. I think it's really hands-on, direct, and intentional.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Question number 7. Communities across the nation are demanding that local police departments evaluate their own practices and make changes that address the disproportionate arrests and shootings of people of color. Please tell the panel how you feel about this and what your plan is to address it.
So number one, I think it's the responsibility of the police department to always evaluate your processes, always. So that's what we did. That's what I do. And that's what we'll do here. I discussed kind of in detail our crime plan. Our crime plan is very specific as it relates to how we go about making arrests and who we're arresting. It's not the dragnet approach, the zero tolerance approach. It really is focused on a specific geographical area, looking for those people who are known offenders. Because the data will show you that 90% pretty much of every community obeys the law, is following the law, is good. It's that 10% where crime is happening, and generally by those 5%. And candidly, that's who you should go after. You should never try to police 100% because then you're accused of over-policing, which you are, and it's disproportionate. Then you have to talk about training. In the other panel, we discussed in detail use of force. Use of force training is important. Everybody needs to know the responsibility of de-escalation and understand that that's really our job. Every call should start from that perspective. How can I de-escalate it? Because it makes it safer for me, the officer, as well as the citizen that I'm about to engage in. The game I like to call it is the if then. If this happens, then I can do this. If that happens, then I can do that. And when you do that, you can pretty much cover every scenario. And of course, there's some outside of that. But what it does, in my opinion, it gives you that moment of pause to where you're really just not reacting, you're actually proactive. And the key is to make every engagement as safe as it can be. We understand that some people are going to be arrested and some people, that's what they need to be. One of the things that I remember is I've had several of my officers tell me that people say, thank you. You know I did wrong, but you were polite and professional to me. And that's ultimately the goal.
So as a follow-up, you mentioned the crime plan. Does it specifically address the internal procedures and practices around disproportionate arrests and shootings?
So not specifically like that. Our general orders covers that. Because what we found is that if you actually train properly from the beginning and as you become an officer and you adhere to the Fourth Amendment, Graham versus Connor, your use of force is not a right. That's been taught wrong. The right is for the people to be protected by the Fourth Amendment. We have a responsibility to use force, but we have a responsibility to use that reasonably. So that's what we teach in Dallas and that's what we preach. But the crime plan is not a don't go to this area or don't go to that area. It's predicated on intelligence and evidence-based. And what we did is we hired criminologists to actually analyze our data. And based on their recommendations, they created what we call grids, which is 330 feet by 330 feet. So real small and specific. And they say, this is where the bulk of your crime is occurring, and this is where you need to be. We do what we call prescription or dosages, and we call it high visibility dosage. And what that is they identified the critical times that the crime is happening, and 15 minutes of every hour of those critical hour spans, we have officers there, and their primary job is to turn their red lights on just to be highly visible. And what we've discovered is that gives people that pause before they do something wrong. So we've gotten incredible results for that. The other side of the coin is really focused on repeat offenders. A lot of covert activity there, so I'm not going to go into the details on that. But what we find is as we weed the criminal element out and so back into the community that we're weeding out, we get a lot of support and we're not getting complaints at all. People are really proud of our results because they've been pretty significant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Avery, we received a lot of comments from the community asking that the new police chief focus on holding officers accountable. What does this mean to you and how would you hold officers accountable?
So holding them accountable is acknowledging and being transparent. I believe in accountability. I believe that you don't just hold your officers accountable, your officers hold you accountable. The community should hold me accountable. This is what I believe. If you do right, I'm going to be your loudest cheerleader and say you're absolutely right. What I'll supply the community with is why you were right. But if you're wrong, you're going to be held accountable. It'll be just, it'll be fair, but you're going to be held accountable when you do wrong. And that's how I feel about it. Accountability is not a box you check. It's really an action. And I believe in holding officers accountable. And this is what I've learned. Officers expect to be held accountable. It's when no one is held accountable or they feel like the accountability is not fairly applied. That's when they have issues, but officers know and they expect it. So that's been my experience, and that's what I would do here. It's a very important piece of my leadership.
Thank you.
Avery, please tell us how you believe some of the recent law enforcement legislation in the state of Washington has affected how police officers do their job. Will that legislation affect Tacoma's ability to hire and retain police officers?
So I think there's a perception, which could be real to some, that officers aren't allowed to police. That's not just in the state of Washington. I've heard that throughout the country. The reality is that's not what is happening. What it's really doing is reminding us of the Fourth Amendment protection that society has. They have a right to feel safe. They have a right to expect us to know the law and how we enforce the law. In my humble opinion, I believe we've gotten away from that. We've allowed our general orders to really kind of drift away from how force is supposed to be. A lot of our agencies will tell you, well, I have a right to use force on the public. You do not. You've never had a right to use force. It's a responsibility, and that responsibility carries a heavy weight. So again, I don't think the law is hindering you. I think it's a level of a lack of understanding. So we have to get back to really teaching the Fourth Amendment, as well as Graham versus Connor, which is really the grandfather of use of force. And I think if we do that and prepare our officers right, with de-escalation being the goal, they'll realize that this is not a handicap. It really is to bring us back to the way policing was supposed to be in the beginning. We don't have the right to abuse people. We don't have the right to mistreat people and then say, well, we're just enforcing the law, because that's not the truth. The fact of the matter is we have a responsibility to protect the people, and we use the law to do that. So that's how I feel about it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, question number 10. The Tacoma City Council has passed Resolution 4622, acknowledging the disparate impacts of systematic racism and affirming the city of Tacoma's commitment to anti-racist systems transformation. As the next police chief, you will be expected to lead these efforts for the Tacoma Police Department. What's your first step?
Communication. I really have to understand where this is coming from, because what I've learned is that you talk to different people, you get a different response. So I'm going to start there. I understand that racism is alive. I won't use the word well, because I don't think it is well. I think it's wrong. But we have to be honest in our approach. We have to be honest in our acknowledgement. And it starts with having robust conversation, understanding that those conversations can be difficult, because a lot of times they're filled with a lot of passion. So we can't really carry our feelings on our sleeve. We have to be strong enough to sit there and really, really listen and get a clear understanding why people feel the way they feel. I don't believe people just make up stories. I think they're very true. Again, I've had experiences myself personally. My brother has spent the majority of his life in prison. I've seen him abused by police, and this is real stuff to me. So I understand. It's got to start with conversation, and then you got to start with what are we going to do to fix the problem. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but we do need to come away from the table with a list of actionables that we all agree on and we all walk forward. Because the reality is I can't fix it by myself. No chief can. It's going to take all of us to really be serious and intentional about fixing the problem.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Avery, I have I have your last question, but I have another question that I'm going to ask you that's not on your sheet that I asked the other candidates. And basically, it's that the next chief that comes in has really two key issues that need to be addressed, or key areas that need to be addressed. The first of which is reconciling the relationship of the police department with the communities that it serves, specifically communities of color. The other is recognizing that that can't be done without the people of the men and women of the Tacoma Police Department, and how you intend to lead that group of predominantly white people to do that work.
So I'll kind of go backwards because I already hit on the first one. Number one is, as I've said, it's all going to start with communication. And from there, you get a level of understanding about cultural competencies that you may not have. The fact of the matter is, we've hired people and we hadn't thought about what areas we're going to send them to. We hadn't prepared them. So many times they get out of academy and they're completely culture shocked. So we need to fix that piece of it as well. One thing that I think would be beneficial is while they're in the academy, we need to actually have them go out to communities of color and meet the people. These are who you're going to service, and get an understanding that cultures are different, and that's okay. You need to learn cultures. I call it cultural competencies, and the more comfortable you can get in those environments, the better it is for everybody. So that's something that I would do. I mentioned listening sessions. We're going to go there. And if they don't know my command staff, they will, because the idea is Tacoma is small enough to where it should be personal. They should be able to know me, not just as the chief, but they should know I'm Avery Moore. And I already know what Avery Moore is going to say. It should be that intimate. And we have an opportunity to do that really with the entire police department. Again, Tacoma is not as big as Dallas, where there's 3,000 officers. Here it's 300 plus, and we can actually be much more intimate than what we are. And that just starts with acknowledgement, again, through conversation, that I really don't understand why people of color feel the way they do. I'll share my stories with them, my perspective, but we're going to be out in the community, and they'll get to hear firsthand why people feel the way they feel. And the great thing about it is I don't waste time of telling you you shouldn't feel the way you feel. You have every right to feel that way. What we're going to do is listen and then come up with solutions to how we can address it and get on one team of making this city the safest city that we can make it. And ideally, I want to be the safest city in the country. That's my goal. I want other cities to call and say, how did y'all accomplish that? I'm that aggressive. I'm that optimistic, and I care that much. We can do better in policing, and we don't have time to just sit back and argue against and make up reasons. That's senseless at this point. It is exactly what it is, and we need to address it head on.
Okay. Thank you for that. I have your final question, which is there any additional information you'd like to share with us regarding your experience or qualifications for this position? And/or do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I will address anything on my resume that I know you said that you read it. If there's anything that I can clear up or add to, I'm more than willing to do that. I just want you to know that I'm very humbled to be here. I don't take this opportunity lightly. I would not have applied if I didn't want to be here. I believe that what the city says they need in a chief, I can deliver. I do have a proven track record in a lot of areas because I've been fortunate enough to be in an agency where I could experience so many things internally as well as externally. And I can bring what I know here. I'm still hungry and thirsty to learn, so I can learn so much from the people of Tacoma. I know it can be scary getting a chief from another state, but I'm not a stranger. I'm a family member of policing 31 years, and I'm eager to learn. You know, I care about people. I care about my officers. I would tell you that they will have no bigger cheerleader than me. If you are right, everybody's going to know. I think we do a poor job of the good work that the men and women do as far as producing it for the public. But we're going to change that. We're going to take advantage of social media. We're going to take advantage of our partnership with the media and give the officers the credit that they deserve for the hard work that they do. And I think the community will probably be shocked and say, wow, I didn't know they were doing all this. Likewise, we need the community to support us, and they will support us through our efforts of transparency as well as accountability. So again, any questions you have about my resume, I'm willing to answer. Any questions about anything else? So we're good? No, I'm good. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.